Your Honor, Mr. Speaker, and fellow members of the Legislative Assembly, and family and guests. What happened here today opens another chapter in the political history of the province of Alberta. All of us are now part of that history, and we have a duty and responsibility to add to it as constructively as we can. Albertans have trusted the members just sworn in with the task of forming a majority government, which I'm confident will happen when Your Honour's Executive Council tests the confidence of this chamber in the days to come. And we have been given a mandate to implement an election platform that was endorsed by the largest number of voters to cast ballots for a government in the history of our province. We must never forget that it is a deep privilege to govern and serve on behalf of all 4.3 million citizens who call Alberta home. We inherit this responsibility from legions of women and men who have gone before us in this place and in the parliamentary institutions that it represents. It is humbling, it is inspiring to follow in the footsteps of so many brilliant political leaders and public servants. In fact, I know it can be, as a new member, awe-inspiring and perhaps a bit intimidating the first time you walk up the steps of the legislature and through the marble halls to imagine that we are somehow worthy of serving in this great institution. And so I offer the reflection of the late, great, the Right Honourable John George Diefenbaker, who once said that when he first arrived in the House of Commons, he looked around at the cathedral-like ceiling, at the great pillars in the marble halls, and his esteemed colleagues around him, and he said, "I wondered how I ever got here." And then he said, it wasn't long thereafter I looked around myself and he said, "I wondered how the rest of these guys got here too." Long before this place was built, and before parliamentary government took root in our Alberta, the self-governing First Peoples of this place elected great chiefs, like in the 19th century Crowfoot, the Blackfoot statesman whose genius for diplomacy brokered the treaty on which southern Alberta was founded a century and a half ago, and so many others in his spirit of leadership. In the decades before provincehood, visionary political leaders like Frederick Haltane established the foundations of our government in what was then called the Northwest Territories. Those early prairie legislators fought for the right of responsible government and autonomy within the Canadian Federation, an eternal duty that is among the most important ones which we inherit today. Rutherford, Brownlee, Parlby, Manning, Lougheed, Klein, and so many others. The illustrious list of Albertans who have served our province in this place now includes all of you, the 63 elected members of the legislature who form the governing caucus of the United Conservative Party of Alberta, which also happens to be Canada's newest political party. You are, in the sense of that novelty, of that youth, you are a young, diverse, and impressive reflection of our province today. In fact, I understand that we have perhaps the youngest government caucus in Canada. As we just saw, Albertans of all major faiths, cultures, and languages are represented here. I understand that, I believe in our caucus, some 15 languages are spoken. And that doesn't count the dozens in which I can bring greetings, of course. We have farmers, tradesmen, energy professionals, entrepreneurs, police officers, a bunch of those actually, academics, at least one musician, financial professionals, public servants, and teachers, and as I said at cabinet swearing in, we even have some lawyers. And I bet we could ice a decent pickup hockey team, and certainly with Scow and Nixon, we're going to have the best basketball team in legislature history. And as I said during the swearing in of Executive Council, Your Honour, all of us will strive every day to live up to the trust conferred in us by Albertans and to meet the burden of responsibility that comes with the offices that have been bestowed on us today. We will seek to do so by keeping our commitments to get our economy back to work after years of adversity, to stand up for Alberta against other governments and foreign-funded special interests that seek to block our progress, and to make life better for all Albertans, especially by ensuring the quality of our public services like universal health care and education. We will do our very best to succeed in these endeavours, but if and when we fall short, as we undoubtedly will at some occasions, we will learn from our mistakes, and we will redouble our efforts to deliver on our commitments to Alberta, to Albertans, to do so in a spirit of humility and servant leadership. We will be open and transparent and respect the principles of democracy, including the vital role of the free press in holding government to account. Our members may not always appreciate what they read about themselves in the papers. I know I don't. But that too is a rich part of our democratic history. Our caucus may take some comfort in the fact that in the Alberta media today there is nothing quite like the Scots Coulee Outlaw, a newspaper that was published briefly and memorably in southern Alberta during the late 1880s. Its motto was, quotes, "with malice towards all and charity to none." And it was particularly hard on Conservatives, which I'm sure we can all relate to. The Outlaw said of one Tory candidate, quotes, "he had been forced by circumstances to enter a sphere for which he is as much fitted as the editor of the McLeod Gazette is to conduct the New York Times. Nature did not think it necessary to bestow on him the gift of expression," unquote. The political commentary on modern social media can be as bad or worse, though perhaps not as elegantly expressed. But as I said on election night, it is my fervent hope that as legislators on all sides of the House, that we can and will work together to stop the coarsening of our public discourse and to raise the bar of civility, decorum, and respect in this, the People's House. This is an important goal, in my view, for we live in a time of rampant skepticism, even cynicism, about the institution of Parliament, about politics in general, and about the motives of those who serve in our legislatures. And so I want to remind all of you that today you become not just the participants in, but also the custodians of 8 centuries of the organic development of the brilliant institution of the Westminster parliamentary tradition. This legislature is a parliament. We stand in awe and gratitude for those who have gone before us, elected to serve their people and to protect the freedoms upon which our society is built. As constitutional expert Sir Ivor Jennings wrote, quotes, "So much of the history of freedom is part of the history of Parliament that freedom and parliamentary government are often considered to be the same thing." And as one of my great heroes, the martyr of Confederation, Thomas D'Arcy McGee said, quotes, "The 2 great things that all men aim at in free government are liberty and permanency, which are incarnated in our parliamentary system. There is not," he said, "because of these institutions, there is not on the face of the earth a freer people than the inhabitants of these colonies," he said, before Confederation. And as the greatest parliamentarian of the 20th century, Winston Churchill, said as leader of the opposition in 1947, "It is not Parliament that should rule. It is the people who should rule through Parliament. The object of Parliament is to give effect not to spasmodic emotions of the electorate, but to the settled, persistent will of the people. What they wanted to do, they could do, and what they did not want to do, they could stop. All this idea of a handful of men getting hold of the state machine, having the right to make the people do what suits their party and personal interests or doctrines, is completely contrary to every conception of surviving Western democracy. All this idea of a group of supermen and super planners, such as playing the angel, as the French call it, and making the masses of the people do what they think is good for them without any check or correction, is a violation of democracy, unquote. And as Diefenbaker said, unless we maintain respect for Parliament's democracy, unless we maintain respect for Parliament, democracy will wither and die. Parliament's supremacy, and by this he also means this legislature, demands the maintenance not only of the forms of parliamentary government, but also its soul. And finally, let me quote the great founder of modern conservatism, Edmund Burke, who said that, quotes, "It ought to be the happiness and glory of a representative to live in the strictest union, the closest correspondence, and the most unreserved communication with his constituents. Their wishes ought to have great weight with him, their opinion high respect, their business unremitted attention. It is his duty to sacrifice his repose, his pleasures, his satisfaction to theirs, to his constituents, and above all, ever, and in all cases, to prefer their interests to his own. But his unbiased opinion, his mature judgment, his enlightened conscience, he ought not to sacrifice to you, to any man, or to any set of men living." This was Edmund Burke's famous speech to the electors of Bristol. And so, colleagues, you inherit a great responsibility today, not only to serve Albertans, but to preserve and to improve this institution of parliamentary government. Your Honour, thank you for welcoming the members of our government into the legislature. Members, thank you for all the work and sacrifices that you made to get to this day, and for all that you will do for the people of Alberta in the months and years ahead.